You got no audio, Jay. No one can hear you. You did your whole intro and no one could hear it.
That was the best intro ever. Out the bag. So we are now speaking to Lunacy, founder of Kniteforce Records, and an all-round Don who's been around for, well, since pretty much the start of the rave scene, and still going.
Long enough to get real grey.
Yeah, well, that will happen within a couple of years being in the music industry, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, mine was actually from having children, I think. I had brown hair, then I had a baby. Well, I didn't actually have the baby, but a baby was born, and then my hair just went grey. I suppose I should be happy I didn't just go bald.
Well, you know, I've definitely got a few little greys coming in there. They're sneaking in. There's no escaping them, that's for sure. So thanks very much for joining us, Chris. We've got a ton to talk about. As I say, you know, you've been very active in the scene, whether it be at the forefront or behind the scenes for over 3 decades now. But let's start from the beginning. When was it when you first kind of got excited about music? It doesn't necessarily have to be electronic music, but that point where you heard something and you were like, oh, I can connect to that.
There are a few things. The first one was like I grew up in a fairly religious household, and we didn't have any music. My sister was talking to me about this last night. I haven't really thought about it, but no one ever played any music in my house. So I, you know, except for hymns when we went to church, and that doesn't count as music really. So the first time I ever really heard anything musical at all that wasn't like that was probably like something by Cliff Richard, which didn't excite me very much. So the first thing that I heard and I thought, oh, that's interesting, was actually Adam and the Ants. And it wasn't one of their main ones. My sister had a single and I flipped it over and they had a track called Friend or Foe. And what I loved about it is it had this kind of tribal drum. And I just thought it just sounded like nothing I'd ever heard. So musically, that was the first thing I heard that I was interested in. And then it would have been hip hop. Like I didn't really pay much attention to chart music. But eventually I saw Breakdance the movie. And while I liked breakdancing, what really interested me was the DJ in the background and the electro and the hip hop music. So of course I rushed out to try and buy that, and all I could get was Breakdance the movie album, which was full of things like Shannon, and you know, there was one track by Chris the Glove Taylor on there, the only one that was, you know, Shannon's actually a good track, but at the time I was looking just for, you know, some hip hop, and that's what I got. And then I went through a kind of all the blandest, easiest to get hip hop that you could buy at Trump's, which was our local record shop. So I got, you know, like the edited version of Fear of a Black Planet, and you know, the bleeped out Eric B and Rakim album, and you know, and then it was all hip hop for me. Everything, you know, I got so into that. I did a paper round just to earn money to buy hip hop. So I was and remain big on all of that stuff. Big Daddy Kane and EPMD and Eric B and Rakim and Public Enemy, and you know, all of that. Absolutely loved that. So that was really my first music, and even then it was strange because I was going to school and everyone was into Metallica and Iron Maiden, and I didn't, you know, I've always seemed to go this way. If everyone's going that way, I always seem to end up this way. So
well, it's obviously done you all right.
Sorry?
It's obviously done you okay.
Oh yeah, I don't mind that. I don't mind. I don't know. I see it in my son actually. He's the same way. You take him to a park to play, and he just wanders off and goes to look at the trees or something, and ignores all the kids and just does something else. And that's kind of always been my way. I find something that's interesting, and then I just follow it until it's boring. So far, music hasn't got boring for me, and I just keep on following, you know. So yeah, so mostly it was hip hop, and then the first time I kind of turned around and went, "Oh, this is different," would be that time when Mars Pump Up the Volume came out, and there was a Simon Harris release, and Jack Your Body by Steve Silk Hurley, but really it was Mars Pump Up the Volume and Paul Hardcastle 19, because both of those did all that crazy sampling. And I just was like, this is incredible. What is this? Like this whole thing they were doing, because it kind of resonated with hip hop because of the scratching. But, you know, all that just the clever editing in Mars, Pump Up the Volume. Still to this day, I listen back to it and I just love it. Like the weird Asian singing that comes in, like the Indian singing, and not the chart version, the flip side, the 12-inch mix with all the stuff, and Bomb the Bass. Well, that original Beat This and all of that, all of those things. My mind's just like, wow, this is amazing. You know, like, but what people forget, like on nowadays, if you grow up nowadays, this sort of music is just part of how you grow up. But it was absolutely revolutionary to me at the time. I'd never heard anything like it. How it even came into existence was a mystery. How do you make a thing? We didn't know what a sampler was. All I knew was there was just stuff. There were these drums and there was stuff playing over it. And I just thought it was the most brilliant thing ever.
So that's interesting. So that's interesting, right? So even would you say that kind of back then, you obviously loved the song, but there was that kind of next level interest? You know, most people just kind of, you know, you like a song, you don't like a song. It's pretty straightforward, right? But at this point, are you kind of thinking, well, that part's quite interesting, and how have they done that? Are you kind of questioning how these songs are made and kind of sowing some of these production seeds?
I had no idea. Like hip hop was just enough like rock music. I know they're nothing the same, but you still had the singer and you still had the background music. So you didn't really question how it was made. You just knew that you liked it. Or that's how I felt. I didn't think, oh, I wonder how they made this. I didn't really consider that. But when you heard something like Beat This or, you know, like Pump Up the Volume or Paul Hardcastle's 19, you were like, well, that's obviously not a singer. That's not a band. There's no guitars in that. But there's also nothing I really recognise. It was completely alien. So to me, it was just like, not only was it fascinating as a music, I wanted, yes, Art of Noise, I see somebody's mentioned, and he's called Adamski. Adamski was also another one which I heard, and I was like, wow, like, what is this, you know? And I listened to the Adamski album live and direct, round and round and round. I used to catch a bus to where I worked, and I would just listen to that. The only thing I could say that was similar to that I was also interested in was I loved Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells, which was another one where the track just carried on and it kept changing and doing all these different things. Tubular Bells, I could tell what the music was, and at the end you had someone introducing all the different instruments as it built up. But it was another thing. I became fascinated with that kind of music which you can't quite put your finger on how it was done. I love that. I love nothing more than hearing a piece of music and going, how was that done? Because that's just, you know, it's the same reason I ended up loving Aphex Twin later on. I listened to it and I just go, how would you even go about making that, you know?
See, it's interesting, right? I've dabbled in production. I basically made a tune in '95 with a couple of people and an engineer, and I did it 10 years later and then another 10 years. And actually what I found was that the deeper I got into the production process, the more I started over-analysing other music. And I think that's what's kind of put me off really pursuing production. I quite, personally, I quite like that innocence of just going, oh, yeah, that makes me feel, or I like that song, rather than, oh, yeah, he's used that, Gorilla sample pack, or he's ripped that from there. I suppose there's a balance, right?
No, it can ruin music for you. And I know for me, I have two different mindsets. Like I don't know whether everybody does this, but I can kind of turn off bits of my brain so I can enjoy one thing and like in a certain way. So for example, anyone who's followed me knows I absolutely love Nine Inch Nails. They're one of my favorite bands ever. If I had to have just one album, I would have the Downward Spiral probably. And in all the time that I've loved Nine Inch Nails, I've never really considered sampling them, because my head doesn't think of sampling Nine Inch Nails. My head just goes, wow, this is amazing. I love Nine Inch Nails. And then I have another sort of brain which will be analysing stuff. So quite often when I hear, new music, I will do exactly what you said. I'll be like, oh, that's the amen from that, and that's the sample from there, and that's this from there. And what I love most of all is when I hear a piece of music and it transcends that, and I don't hear the samples. And there's very few artists that still do that for me, where I hear the music and I'm immediately like, my mind will still ask the questions, but it won't get any answers. A perfect example of an artist that does that for me is Hyper on Experience. I listen to one of his tracks and I'm like, well, I don't know where any of that came from. like normally you can be like, oh yes, you know the amen, or you know this. Even if you listen to the older Hyper on Experience stuff, where he's using like duck noises and just strange stuff, you listen to it and you think, well, I still don't know where any of that came from. And when I got to do a remix of Disturbance, it's got that little dot 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 noise in it. And I was like, oh, I've always wondered where that came from. And it's like from the end of a bit of a drum loop with a spoken thing. And he's just taken the last tiny little bit of it. And I would never in a billion years do that. Like, I just
Amazing.
never. I was just like, why would you do that? Why would you take that bit? And why would you make that into a riff noise? Like, so I love that. I love it when I hear something and I'm just like, no idea. No idea how you did that or why you chose it or, you know. And when I got back, I actually was like, oh, he didn't include that noise. And then I realized what it was. And still, like, I just think that's brilliant. And you sent me a new EP recently, and it's so exciting for me because I listened to it. Like, I don't know what any of this is. I don't know how he did any of that.
Well, do you know what? I think, most people know I'm a massive Prodigy fan, from seeing them at Astoria in 91 to,
their stuff. You're like, that's where did
there was a guy. Yeah, I can't remember. There was a guy who did a mix it called What Sample Lurks. And what he did was he did a mix of all of the tracks that Liam had used in the first album or two and just played them in their entirety. And it was only at that, I'm actually starting to get goosebumps. It's only at that point where you start going, holy shit. Like, you knew he was a genius, but actually, like, that art of sampling, like, he was one of the masters of doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, all of that stuff. Like, there's various types of genius when it comes to music, in my opinion. There's genius in the building of music. That's something that Liam's incredible at. It's something that Alex Hyperon is incredible at. Then there's genius in concept, which is something Ray Keith has, where he will do something like, for example, it's a classic tune, The Terrorist, and The Terrorist, a very simple track. But the genius of it is that there's very little going on, and yet every bit is exactly right. And then you get people who cross over and do both, like Andy C, who has revolutionised the scene 3 times, as far as I can tell. First time with 31 Seconds, because while drum and bass was starting to get into that was the tune that brought in the boom chat rhythm as standard. And then the second time he did it was with the one where he went into triplet time, which nobody else was doing at all. And I know that all went bad afterwards, but it was incredible when he did it. Everybody was like, what on earth is happening? And the third time, I've completely forgotten. I can't remember.
It was well, quite possibly it could have been any of the Alexandra Palace or Wembley Arena gigs where, one solo DJ, packing out an event that size. That's definitely a milestone for...
but I was just talking about in production where someone puts a record out and suddenly that's it. Everything's changed. Like, there's a number of people that have done it once. Like Pendulum have done it once. Where a track comes out and everything, that's it. Like anybody who does anything like they used to, or Terminator by Roughage Crew and Metalheads, there's certain tunes that wander in and then everything's different. That's everything's different. You've got to change your whole way of thinking. So I always love that. That's probably the high that I chase with every piece of music that I make and listen to. That's what I'm looking for. Something which I hear that just makes my jaw drop, and I'm just like, that's just something where I can't. I know I've reached it because my brain doesn't try to analyze it. My brain's gone. It gives up doing that, and it's just enjoying it.
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to be a revolutionary track. Like Asen sent me a new track he's done called Champion, and I absolutely love it. I think it's one of the best new old school things since we've been back doing vinyl. Honestly, it's probably my all-time favorite tune of the year, and it's not especially complicated and it's not especially clever, but it's absolutely brilliant. Like, it sounds like a follow-up to Trip to the Moon that should have happened. Like, Window in the Sky is great, but Champion sounds like it should have followed Trip to the Moon. And it's just, I keep saying to him, we've got to do something with this. I know it's going on your box set, but it's got to do something else. We've got to get this in front of people. I don't want it to get lost in a box set. I want people to be going, look at this tune, Sorry, I got it.
Yeah.
It's just,
No, it's great.
And I'm just like, wow. I want everybody to hear this. You've got to hear this. It's so good.
Well, that's nice. So look, you're hearing those bits and pieces that are coming through in those kind of early electronic kind of beats and hip hop.
Yeah.
From my understanding, the DJ passion for you came before the production side, right?
Yeah, I always it's a weird dual thing. I absolutely love DJing, selfishly. I'm not so keen on DJing in front of people. I'm quite happy just to DJ at home. I think it's because of my history, actually. I think if I hadn't have had Smarties happen, I would have probably remained. Before Smarties, I was quite shy and introverted, and my most comfortable place is on my own. Like, I'm happy being on my own. I don't get lonely very often. I like being alone. I do need people. Everyone needs people, but I need them slightly less than most people seem to need them for some reason. It's just the way I'm built.
Yeah.
So I was quite happy learning to scratch and just, mixing stuff in my bedroom and all that sort of thing. And then Smarties happened, and because it did so well and went in the charts, it forced me to interact with people on a different level. Suddenly I had to do interviews and talk to like fans and, do the whole tour thing. And I found that really hard. Like, that wasn't, I didn't like it. I didn't have anything to say. I didn't, it just wasn't comfortable for me at all. So I would have much rather not done that. But because I did do that, it gave me the courage to do other things. It was basically good for me, in that.
Yeah.
But still,
I mean, I suppose there was.
Go on.
Go on. I was going to say there was no like real build up, right? It was like Smarties happened pretty early on, so it was like normally people are building, and then away you go. But you were kind of fall straight into there pretty early.
I DJ'd a few live gigs for Mr. Tom. Did these events called Ultimatum, so I played a couple of events for him, and they were quite small. And I remember embarrassing myself terribly because I was playing just before DJ Hype, so I thought I'd do some scratching, and I shouldn't have done that because it was really bad. Anyway, so I'd done a few gigs like that, and then we put out the first Smarties record, which was just like just sampled Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. It was a silly little thing we did. I think it sold like 500 or 1,000 records, and then Sesame Street happened and did like 250,000, and it was a different world. And yeah, I mean, it changed things, and it changed how I looked at things. But when it comes to DJing, still DJing is something that I did before the music industry, and so it remains part of me that is selfishly kept aside from the industry. I do DJ live, obviously, and I've done tours and all that sort of thing. But given the choice, I'm happier in the studio or doing record label stuff than I am being in front of a crowd and doing all that stuff,
Which has always been a bit of a funny one, right? Because
go on.
Sorry, go on, Chris.
I was just saying, you have to find the thing as you get older. Like, you learn more and more about yourself and what you can and can't do. I DJ'd all over the place, and I like it well enough. But what I really like is the record label stuff. That's what I'm good at. It's what I enjoy doing the most. It's where I'm happiest, Nothing's more exciting to me than getting a bunch of new tunes from an artist and then moving them about and saying, oh, we should have this on the A side, and if we do the artwork like this, and what if we did it as a double pack or a 10-inch, or we could do it like this and we could put it out this way. We could have this remixed by this person. That's the stuff I like. So DJing, yeah, I like it. But if I had to only choose one thing, it would be running the label.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, so let's get back to let's look at the kind of hardcore scene, right? So at what stage, if you're kind of into this hip hop, you're hearing this early electronic stuff, at what point are you starting to get listening into the kind of sort of rave hardcore sounds, and when it grabs you?
Well, it was funny, really, because it was a complete switch. Back in those days, and it's probably still the same way, when you're into hip hop, a lot of people who are into hip hop are just like this. Hip hop is everything. Every other music is shit. I'm only listening to hip hop. Hip hop is the best, And I used to work in a skateboard shop, and that was my attitude. I just thought hip hop was brilliant. And we used to see, like, I would get there on a Saturday morning at like 9 a.m. We'd see people coming home, and I used to call them the purple people because they were all ravers and they'd all be all haggard with the hats and the purple clothes, And so I was, gently mocking of those people, thought they were ridiculous and their silly music. I didn't really know what their music was. And I had a friend at the shop who was older and had dreadlocks, and I really admired. So he didn't like them, so I didn't like them because I was, much more susceptible and much more swayed. And then I ended up getting dragged to a rave, and it was like a complete switch. I went to one rave, and that was probably the last time I bought hip hop for about 5 years. And all I did was buy rave music. And it was like, it was just one of those things. I think at that time, a lot of people had that happen. They were into their thing, then they went to a rave, and they were like, "Oh my god, that's everything. That's all there is now. Everything else is old and not interesting. This is what I'm doing now." Like the next day, I think I went out and tried to find rave records, and I didn't know where to go because I was used to going to Groove in London and places like that for hip hop, and now I'm trying to find Quadrophonia and Cubic 22 and things like that, and I didn't know where to go. I was going to HMV and trying to find rave music, and you'd have to go up to the counter and say, "I'm looking for stuff." Like, because there was no
Have you got that?
didn't have any way
going into HMV and trying to humming the bleeps to
you know
a
what
song.
I mean? Like, you got anything that's like rave music, and even that back then, because it was very underground. People didn't load. It was like there was two whole worlds. There was all these people going raving, and then there was the rest of the world. And when you interacted with the rest of the world, they had no idea what you were talking about. There was nothing. It was like it was totally alien. So, but eventually I found like Music Power and Boogie Times and Black Market and various others. So eventually I started buying all the records. Yeah. But yeah,
what was the? Do you remember the night that you went to?
I do actually. It was Labyrinth in Dalston Lane, and I went with a guy who I didn't like very much. I don't even know why I ended up there. It was very unlike me. Sometimes you find yourself somewhere and you're like, "This isn't me. What am I doing here?" So this guy who I didn't really like said, "Do you want to come to this rave?" And for some reason, I said yes when I didn't really want to. I wanted to stay at home and smoke weed. I had no interest in going out and doing whatever purple people did. And so, I put on my Public Enemy t-shirt and some camo pants and went up there. And I was like, "Oh, this is going to be stupid." Walked in and I was just like, "What is this place?" Because Labyrinth was interesting. I mean, it was a scummy, dirty club, and it was called Labyrinth because it was so confusing. I mean, I don't know if you ever went, but it was.
Yeah, several times. Yeah.
I mean, it was. Yeah, I mean, it was an awful place, and I absolutely loved it. Like, it was just one of the best things ever. Like, stairway that went to nowhere, and then there was a tunnel underneath that didn't do anything, and then there was a garden which was just mud and some rocks. It was. You got up that rickety ladder, like staircase, which looked like it was falling off the wall to get to like the depth charge room where it was all like mellow and stuff.
Well, it felt like someone's front room. I remember going up there for the first time, thinking, "Does someone live here?" Like it just felt like a pair of turntables set up.
Very, very peculiar, but it was just. Honestly, I think about that night. It was just brilliant. I absolutely loved it. It was just the best thing ever. Yeah.
So what are you thinking? So you've come out of there. What do you remember what your takeaway was from that night?
I just wanted to find all that music, all of it. And I mean, because the thing is, even with hip hop, I liked fast hip hop. I loved Silver Bullet and Gunshot. I liked English hip hop. I liked the Rougher Red stuff. Even when I was listening to Eric B. and Rakim, I liked No Amiga, and I loved the fast tunes, Follow the Leader, that sort of thing. So so then I went into Labyrinth and I heard things like Quadrophonia, and that's a nice balance for someone who's into hip hop, because you had that da, 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 like it's just so exciting, wasn't it? Like, yeah, I just loved it. I just loved every bit of it. It was so triumphant. There was something about the music that was like da-da! Like you don't really get that in music, like rock music's be tough and jazz is doodling away over there and pop music is and you know what I mean? Like you get all of that, and there's no real music that's just like exciting and tough without trying to stab you in the eye. Do you know what I mean? Like hip hop's exciting and tough, but he's going to shoot you. Whereas rave music can be exciting and tough, and that's it. That's enough. It doesn't have to do anything else.
I think one of the beautiful things about it was that it was one of the first movements where just individual people were taking creative control of the music and putting it out. You didn't have to hire a massively expensive studio. You didn't have, a load of kind of label execs telling you, no, it's got to be this, it's got to fit in this box. People could start to do, whatever the hell they wanted. So it was, very freeing in that sense, right? And very experimental in that way.
It was, and I've written a bit about this in my latest book. This isn't a plug, but it's interesting because it's something I've been thinking about. I'm a person who tends to Like if I think I tend to pick around subjects and they go into my head and they'll just bounce around, and I'll be lying in bed and I'll wake up in the morning, I'll go, huh, wonder about that, and then it'll just, I'll forget about it and I'll come back to it, like a Rubik's cube. I keep moving it around until I get a whole picture. And I was thinking a while ago that one of the glorious things about early rave music is how faceless it was. I don't think people now really grasp how you would go to a rave and you would just hear rave music and you would have no idea what any of it was. Like before that, when you went somewhere, like if you went to a nightclub, you would hear the music that was played on the radio. So you would know Duran Duran and The Cure, and you'd know Metallica, and you knew who it was. There was, you knew what they looked like. They'd been on TV, you'd seen posters, there were people on T-shirts. And then when you went to a rave, Energy Flash, like eventually you found out it was Joey Beltram, but that came out and that was played and you'd be like, this is brilliant. And there was no information. You had no idea who the person was, what record label it was. It was just one track in a stream of tracks that went on through the whole night. And you had no information, nothing at all. So
well, that was what was so important about the record shops, right? Because even if you listen to pirate radio, yes, you could hear these tracks, but they weren't like kind of radio shows where people saying, and here's the latest song by blah blah,
right.
and they play it. It was like they were mixing and showing off skills like you would expect to kind of hear in the club. So I mean, I remember calling up Weekend Rush and going, can you play that song that goes, can't beat the system, go with the flow? He's like, I don't know what you mean. I was like, the one, and I started singing it or trying to rap it.
We all did.
No, sorry.
Never worked.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, it's called something completely different. All right, Baptized by Dub. Yeah, I never would have guessed that. Thanks.
No, never in a million years. I see someone on the messages is asking about the drugs thing. We didn't call ourselves Smarties, but we were all the most boring people ever. Like Nick used to drink a bit. Tom, I don't think he did any drugs or drink. I did half an E once and was so paranoid that I was going to die that I don't, I just thought I'm going to die, and it just didn't work for me at all. So I really, other than smoking weed that I used to do, no, never done ecstasy. I did a little bit of speed sometimes, but all that would do would make me talk too much, and I already talk too much, so it's a bit pointless. So yeah, we were really not into that kind of stuff really. Everybody else was, and I didn't want to be, but I was too paranoid.
There's definitely a mindset in taking drugs, right? You definitely got. There's actually quite an interesting documentary going on. I think it's Netflix or one of the ones, and this guy, Michael, someone or other, is exploring all of these different drugs as like a 65-year-old guy after writing all of these books. The first one on mushrooms, but it's actually really interesting. He's coming at it from a very spiritual and scientific angle with it. But one of the key things was that it's all about the mindset. I think about doing a bunch of acid now, and I'm like, no thanks.
I would actually. There are some tunes that are so good that I would love to just do ecstasy just to hear those tunes. For example, "Follow Me" by Jam and Spoon. Like you know that track, that string section.
Yeah.
Oh my god! Imagine being on ecstasy and hearing that. Like the only thing is, I think I'll probably have a heart attack and die. But if I was sure I was safe,
maybe just a half then.
Yeah, maybe just a half. If I was sure I was safe, I would absolutely do it just to listen to that track. But I think when it comes to drugs, one of my friends, I have a friend who's a Zen Buddhist, and two things I liked about that. One, I didn't know he was a Zen Buddhist for like 3 years, which is weird. Normally when someone's religious, that's the first thing they tell you. And the thing that he said to me was, drugs should make your world bigger. If they make your world smaller, then it's not right. And I've always kind of thought that's the way to look at it. If it's expanding your world, that's a good thing. If it's making your world smaller, then it's a bad thing. So I have not to make any judgment calls and any of that. Do what you like, do drugs, go skiing off a mountain, eat until you're the size of a planet. It's up to you. As long as you take responsibility for what happens afterwards, smoke if you like or don't. It's your body, your business. Nobody else's business to tell you what to do with it.
This is
expect everybody to deal with your mistakes.
Yeah.
Then it's fine.
Yeah.
So if people, for me, drugs wasn't a thing. I smoked weed until it was detrimental to me, and then I stopped. If somebody still does, brilliant. If they don't, brilliant. Whatever. As long as you're happy, that's the main thing.
I think that's the key thing, right? As long as you're not harming or hurting anyone in the process, then fine. I was the same as you. I smoked until probably mid-late 20s, and it started having the complete opposite effect on me. Rather than kind of being chilled and relaxed or whatever, it started off with my kind of brain going, right, you should do this, you should do that, and my body's like, nah, just sit down and watch TV. But then I started getting a bit paranoid and feeling a little bit kind of enclosed. I was like, no, this is doing the total opposite of what I want it to do. But
Yeah.
at that point you just go, right, well, it's
Well,
not working anymore. See
It's
you later.
been a long time. As you have the glory of hindsight. I now know, looking back, that I suffer from depression and anxiety, and I was basically self-medicating with weed. That was how I got through the day, and that worked. Like any drug you take for an illness, that worked for maybe 20 years, and then it didn't do much, and then it was a problem. So when
Yeah.
I started making things worse, and I had to stop. Of course, it took me 5 years and me destroying most of my life before I actually said, "Oh, maybe I should stop doing it."
You got there eventually, but some people don't, right? Some people are quite happy to stick their head in the sand, and years later, it's still a problem, and it can get too far. So I think everyone's going to move at their own pace, and as long as you get to that right result, in a fairly timely fashion, then you can make it right.
That's right.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
I don't know how we got onto that subject. Kind of meandered
I
along.
have no idea. I totally forgot that we were live as well. So we got up to kind of DJing. So look, I would love to get your personal opinion on the kind of evolution of hardcore, right? It really kind of properly made its mark like 91. Huge mixture of 4/4 break beats were being introduced, lots of bleeps and bass, and then 92, wow, the tempo just kind of went at breakneck speed, right? I think I've said this before, but in my kind of digital music collection, I sorted out every track I've got from 92 and I ordered and put them in order of BPM. My slowest track from 92 was 126, Glide, all right. And then the fastest one was Noise Factory, which was 172. Now, obviously, I know it wasn't that extreme. It was probably 130 to about sort of 150, 160. But anyway, my question is, how are you feeling and thinking about how the music is evolving, throughout that time?
At the time, I don't think I thought about it at all. Like I think, like most people, I mean, when I look back, I can see the mistakes that were made by all the different producers where we could have gone one way and we went a different way and so on and so forth. If you like, mistakes, I'm just generalizing. But at the time, it was all just brilliant, wasn't it? Like I never went, that's too fast or it's going wrong or anything like that because it was still so inventive. There was still no formula, really.
Mm-hmm.
There's another thing I think about sometimes. The beginning of a thing is always very interesting. Doesn't matter whether you're talking about aeroplanes or skateboarding or music. And I use those three for a reason. If you look at the first aeroplanes that they made, fucking bonkers. 25 wings on this, like all the wrong shape. Let's make it so it's flat. They try all these different things to try to get a plane that flies. Most of them look ridiculous and fail, but it is at least interesting. You see the same thing with cars. The first cars, you have them wind up and all this weird stuff. And, you see the same with skateboarding. At first they came out, all these different shapes. They tried plastic and wood and you get all these different patterns. And you see it with rave music. People tried electronic and doing break beats and sampling reggae and using techno. And like there was just this collision of everything. Here's a new thing we can do. Let's just make stuff. And no one has a clue what they're doing. Like everybody's just trying to make a thing to get somewhere. Like with a plane, it's to get in the air. With music, it's to create a feeling. But no one's really got an idea of what they're trying to do. So from 1990 to 1993, and maybe into 1994, all the music was exactly like that. There was no formula. It was just rave music. There was starting to be, this is more jungle and this is more dance and this is more house. But still, for the majority of that time, it was just rave music. And then slowly formula creeps in. So with aeroplanes, they start realizing that two wings are the best with one propeller at the front. And then they try to just finesse that. With skateboarding, they realize the kind of two kick tails and kick tail on either end is about right, and it should be kind of shaped like this. And with music, you started separating into hardcore and drum and bass. And with drum and bass, they started doing the two-step rhythm, like from Andy C's 31 Seconds. And with rave, we started getting into a kind of formula where you had the break beats, and then the piano dropped down like SMD1, who really got the formula exactly right, you know. And just after that, it gets boring, because at that point, everyone's worked out how to do it. And once you've worked out how to do it for the best result, like the current skateboards, they're definitely the best way to have a skateboard, but they are so boring. Like, there's no reason to buy one skateboard or another. They're all exactly the same. They've all got a different picture on that gets scratched off. It's completely boring. Same with planes. They know how to make a plane fly through the air nicely. Boring. And cars as well, to the same degree. They're all round and smooth. You see the advert, like the new BMW 7G9 or whatever, and you're like, well, that looks like the same as all the other BMWs and all the Audis and all the Mercedes. It's all completely boring because they all just look the same. So the trick,
I think,
or the trick now with music, or what we're doing now, is to forget that stuff. When you're making, when you want to make old school now, it's to kind of forget what works and do what's interesting. Prioritize interesting over successful formula. So basically, in those early years, I would say up to about 94, one of the reasons it's so glorious is that everyone just did anything. You know, tunes could be 3 minutes or 8 minutes long. They might be 130 or 170 BPM. They used totally inappropriate samples in the wrong way. No one really had any idea what they were doing. And the result was, there sure was some rubbish music. People forget that some of it really was very, very bad. But the vast majority of it, weirdly, wasn't. The vast majority of it was very, very interesting. You know, even the tracks that were produced terribly, like some of Satin Storm stuff, was still fantastic. You know, there's that one with the distorted bass that comes in. As soon as it drops, it's so bad and bastard, and yet it's still a classic tune. You know?
Yeah. Well, if you look at like it's like all the early Red Alert and Mike Slammer stuff, that was all like 4/8-bit channels, so it was all just like compressed to bungery. But you know, it absolutely did the business.
Yeah, it's very interesting when you look at that sort of stuff, and that's one of the things that I really hate, and it's died down a bit. But for many years, people just went on and on and on about production, and I've always been like, you can't polish a turd. If you have a good track and the production is crap, you still have a good track. If you have a crap track and the production is excellent, you still have a crap track. So all this focus on making it, you know, oh, I'm going to analyze all the stuff and make it all so it's perfect. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But if the track's boring in the first place, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. So I'd much rather hear a badly produced, interesting track than a well-produced, boring one.
Yeah, very interesting. I was having pretty much an identical conversation with Rennie Pilgrim and a few guys. I was out in Spain at the weekend, and we were talking about, you know, the overproduction of drum and bass, where everything is so heavily compressed now that actually you're losing a lot of the dynamics and that kind of feeling of a song. You know, if you look when it was all kind of sort of MIDI, even to the early, you know, digital audio, everything still had a lot of kind of space in it. There was a lot of room to breathe, but you know, now it's a loudness war. How loud can you make your song?
But
and loud doesn't mean good.
It just becomes bland. And I think you see it in a lot of stuff. You see it in the disinterest in modern music in general. Like, it's all so formula and written by 50 people, and the emotion has been washed out of it, and it's all just perfectly produced, and it's all very clinical. It's just boring as shit. Just not. And art cannot be boring. If art is boring, it's a fail. If art stimulates you, if it doesn't make you, you know, go, if it doesn't upset you, or if it doesn't thrill you, then it's dead in the water. It doesn't matter how clever it is; it's just dead in the water. You know.
Yep, you're right. And I think our badger has summed it up quite nicely. Music, not science. I think
people that know. That's one of the great things about the scene right now, is that a lot of the people involved, they know. They've reached the same conclusions I have. They might put it in different words, and they might come at it from a different angle, but it's the same conclusion, and that is, back in the day it was good. Why was it good? One of the reasons is there was no formula. Let's make good music without worrying about formula. That's not to say you shouldn't make it sound great. It's just to say, you know, I mean, any artist, you want to get the best out of it. You want to have the best canvas. You want to have it sounding the best it can. But it's just a slight rearrangement of the priorities to be like, it's important that this hits you on an emotional level. Then the production is important after that.
Yeah, you know? Yeah.
And I think sacrifice that, because back in the day, it's another thing. Like, we used to do things that people would never do it now, and I do it now, and I know that I'm doing it wrong. I'm doing it wrong production-wise. But a good example was somebody mentioned the Jimmy J and Cruelty tunes. Almost all of those had a kick drum and a bass line. Now, you shouldn't put a kick drum and a bass line together. One of those has to be in front. That's why drum and bass doesn't have a kick drum. You can't stick a big, heavy kick drum going with a bass line going because they fight each other in the mix. And yet we used to do that all the time. And it wasn't too bad, you know? So now when I'm doing it, like when I've had Jimmy in the studio again, you have to kind of think about it and go, okay, so now I know those two frequencies clash. I didn't even know what frequencies were when I was making those back in the day. Like if someone said to me this sort of frequency, I'd be like, why are you speaking gobbledygook? So, you know, so it's one of those things where now I'm aware of it, and I might do little trickery, like I'll have the kick drum, but I'll take the bass out of it so that the bass line can come through, or I will cut, you know, side chain or cut bits of the bass out when the kick drum comes through. But still, I don't let the fact that it's wrong to do it stop me from doing it, because the Jimmy J and Cruelty stuff did very well and people love it. And it wasn't correct. It wasn't correct to have a kick and a bass line. But if you do it right or wrong, it sounds good. So I don't care if it's not the right way to do it. It's the right way for that to be done. It wouldn't be right to do that. That would be messing it up. Do you know what I mean? Like it depends on these horses for courses. It depends on what you're doing.
Well, you know, art is subjective, right? Primarily. So, you know, it's very hard, you know, for it to be wrong. Sure, I guess there are general rules and stuff that people have gone by, but I guess that goes back to the earlier thing that you were saying, that, you know, with everyone finding their feet and experimenting, trying different stuff, and then all of a sudden it's kind of coming, going, right, okay, guys, we found the formula. And then all of a sudden everyone's traveling down that path, and you've lost that variety and excitement of what's going on. So, you know, good to hear you. Ben,
producing is to decide which rules to abandon. You know, to look at it and go, yeah, I know that's how it should be done, but I'm not going to do it. And it is difficult to do that. It's very hard because most producers of my age, you know, we've started off not knowing what we're doing, then we've learned how to do it, and then we've kind of got bored because we know how to do it and it's become autopilot. And then it's quite hard to go, right, I'm not going to do that anymore, and try to unlearn all those things that you've learned. So there's lots of little things. I have lots of little things I remember. Like I very much like the Brian Eno thing of whatever worked last time, don't do that again. I try to keep that as my mantra in the studio. Depending on what I'm doing with Jimmy J and Cruelty, whatever worked last time still works. Keep doing it. So it depends on what you're doing. But in general, when I'm doing the lunacy stuff, for when I'm being that artist, I try to abandon what I've done before as much as I can. You know, it doesn't always work, but then that's art. Sometimes you're going to work really hard and come out with absolute drivel. That's the way it is.
Exactly, right. All right, I want to take a little bit of a step back again to really kind of the start of your production, where this kind of happened, and where the beginning of Kniteforce kind of fits into that. So let's talk about, first of all, kind of your studio, your first setup. How's that all come about?
Well, we'd had Sesame Street and we'd made some money out of it, and Tom bought a nice car, and I still am not that interested in cars. You know, I don't care really, as long as it gets me there. And I thought, well, if I didn't really think in career terms, but I did quite like the idea of making music and then that being my living. That seemed like a good way to go. Like I'd worked in Pizza Hut and Waitrose, so it was a step up to not be doing that. I also had some issues with Suburban Bass, and I felt like we weren't treated very well. So I thought, well, you know, the only person and we also had issues with EMI, who also didn't treat us very well. They signed us and then wanted us to do ballads, you know, because they're obviously smart, good at doing ballads. I mean, what the fuck? So anyway, and then we had this issue with a manager who did this tour for us and tried to, you know, it was meant to be a $60,000 tour, and I think I got 150 quid out of it. And I only got that because I borrowed it off the manager because I ran out of money. But the other two and the Smarties didn't get anything. And when I combined all of that, I thought, well, the only person who's not going to rip me off is me. So if I'm gonna not rip myself off and do my own label, then I'm going to need to learn to use a studio. So I asked Nick, because Nick from Smarties was very knowledgeable about it, and I knew Austin, of course, from Future Assassins, because he had helped with the Suburban Bass release. So I asked them for advice, and I went out and I bought I think it was a Allen and Heath mix desk, and I got an SY85 keyboard, and I found a secondhand SH101, an S1000 sampler with like 2 meg of memory, and I slowly set up this thing, and I had it all laid out, and I got it all wired up. I think Austin came around and wired it up, and then I ignored it for about 6 months. So I didn't know how to use any of it.
Do you know what? You did much better than I did, but I think in '94, I went out to the local just bric-a-brac, the store that I guess it was kind of like you sell something there, and it was, I can't remember the name of it, but anyway, they had an Atari ST there, and I thought, I am going to learn to produce tunes. So I bought it, sat at home, turned it on, and I thought, all right, I don't have a copy of Cubase. Even if I did, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know anyone. Switched it off. 6 months later, I took it back to him and sold it back to him for like half the price.
Well, that would have happened to me, except that I really didn't want to do a normal job. I liked not doing that, and I could see the Smarties money was going to eventually run out. So there was a small window of time where I needed to spend that money on getting a record label sorted out. So I turned on the S1000, and I don't know if anyone ever read an S1000 manual, but it starts off treating you like an absolute moron, and then it leaps into assuming you're a scientist or something. It starts off like, to turn it on, press the on button. And I was like, okay. And then it was like,
this is all going well.
Yeah, I was like, this is good. And then it said, I remember this distinctly, we're going to assume you know what an ADSR envelope is. Go to and I was like, what? What are we talking about now? I don't know what that is. So immediately I was like, oh, well, fuck, I'm not going to try. So, yeah, and then I realized I really did have to try. So then I spent probably 2 months annoying Austin and Nick in equal measure by phoning them up and saying, I'm trying to do this thing on a sampler. How do I do it? And they would try and guide me through it. And I eventually understood it. And I eventually made Lunacy Project 2, which is just awful. But it was a start, it was a start. And then I started getting more and more into it and just, learning how to do it. I eventually, a few years ago, I learned to play the guitar, so I think I can call myself a musician now. But I still don't really regard myself as musically inclined. I'm much more cut and paste. I'm much more interested in sampling and editing and stuff like that. So yeah, the sampler. Once I cracked the sampler, then I was away. Then I could do stuff. It didn't matter that my pianos were terrible and so on. Yeah. So eventually, I learned that, and then I started doing a label and. I just kind of got on with it. I've always been like that. People are always like, oh, you do so many things, but it's just because I see something interesting and then I do it. I don't know if it's arrogance or stupidity. I just assume that I can do it and then I do it. And then sometimes it goes wrong and that's just life. But, I thought, well, I'll start a record label up. No one told me I couldn't. No one said you can't do this. No one said I had to do anything. So I was like, and I wanted to do it with my friends because they'd supported me all the way through Smarties, driving me places and, coming to the events and I wanted to get them in the studio because I figured if I can do it, anyone can do it. Like, I don't know how to play music. I got like 13% in my music exam. I was kicked out of it. I couldn't play any instruments, and here I was with a tune in the chart. So I figured if anyone, basically anyone can make this if they want to. So me and my friends just started making tunes together, and yeah, it was pretty easy, really. We decided to call ourselves Kniteforce because. As a group, we only ever met at night, usually at my house, and it just kind of became the name we used. I can't remember why. I do remember we didn't want to be Knight NIGHT because that means our logo would be NF, and that was the National Front, and we didn't want that. And we also didn't want to be Knight in Shining Armour, hence the terrible spelling. But even that worked out well because now I don't have to spell properly.
Well, and also for people searching for you online, it's an absolute dream. At least you can separate yourself from anyone else searching for Knights or whatever. So that's a win.
I know. I went to go and buy kniteforce.com and somebody wants like 5 or 6 grand for it. And I emailed them and said, no one's going to buy that except me. And I'm not going to give you that. And they were like, no, you have to give us that. And I was like, kniteforcerevolution.com it is. So that was that. He can sit on kniteforce.com for the rest of his life because he's never going to sell it. Who's going to buy that except for me?
Someone hoping they'll sell it to you for 10 grand, clearly.
I won't, because I don't do that. I don't do bullying or manipulation. If someone says you have to do this, I immediately just stop doing it. I'll do something else instead. Whatever. I don't care. You know. I always hate that thing you see in movies where there's like they put a gun to someone's head and they're like, "You made me do this." No, I didn't. You did that. That's nothing to do with me. I'm not going to do what you said just because you set up the situation. Sorry, side thing. But anyway, yeah. So we set the label up, and then a very talented friend of mine called Rebecca Try, she designed the logo for us, and we went through a few logos, and then we just started putting records out. Nice. It's really that simple. I knew Paul at Porky's from cutting Sesame Street because I've met him, so I just phoned him up and said I wanted to cut a record, and went there and did that. I sent it to Adrenaline because at the time Suburban Bass used Adrenaline, so I've been there and I knew them. It was really just phone calls and getting on with it.
I think it's making best of that situation, right? You know, I remember distinctly, I didn't have any connections. I didn't know anyone. I was just, you know, just a pure hardcore raver, just going out, you know, week in, week out. And I think once I came close to meeting the guys from Dream FM, we said we'd had a tape, we'd meet them, but we got a bit too stoned, and so we bottled it and never did it. But you know, if you've got those connections to kind of get in there, it sounds like it was the best thing. I mean, actually, just thinking about it, your first release, right, was '93. So you're 30 years next year.
Yeah, we cut it in '92 and it came out in '93. So I'm never quite sure where you judge the release, the start of the label from. I don't know.
Right, okay.
So
well, I suppose technically it started in '92 then.
I like blurry, messy stuff. I don't. I'm quite happy not quite knowing. You know, people say, "When did you start the label?" I'm like, I don't know, '92, '93, around then. I don't have to have everything all neat and tidy. I like a little bit of chaos. Oh yeah.
So what? So it sounds like, you know, there wasn't really like, right, this is what the label's all about, this is what we're going to do, or was there, you know, what was the kind of thinking as you kind of got the label off the ground?
We just wanted to make wicked tunes. Anything that inspired us, we wanted to be like. You know, like Future Primitive, for example, they absolutely loved slamming vinyl. So that was their inspiration. Like, they wanted to do tunes like slamming vinyl. So they would say to me, "Chris, I want to make a tune like this." And I'd be like, "Good luck. I've got no idea how to do that." So we would just kind of, luckily, you know, we were all kind of weirdly driven. Like, they would just go and try to learn pianos. None of us could play shit, but they would go to like Alex's house. Stu and Alex would go to Alex's house, and they would just play on the grand piano until they worked out how to do Congress's piano or whatever. And then they would come in the studio and make a piano up, and we'd go from there. And Alki D, me and Alki D, we just both loved all like the sort of, we both loved things like Joey Beltram and the early Euro stuff, you know, B-sides and Frank DeWolf and all that stuff. We loved that. And we also loved jungle. So we just stuck those things together, even though they didn't really go together at that time. So the first few releases were just like chaotic kind of kick drummy stuff with jungle samples and stuff in it. But there was no plan other than, this is fun, let's do this.
You know? And did you feel that changed as the label kind of progressed through the years?
Yeah. I ended up doing Happy Hardcore, which was a bit weird. Like, when I look back, I don't know how that happened, because my influences were not that. I didn't mind a good piano tune, but like, my stuff was, I like The Hypnotist. I liked you know, Energy Flash. I liked all that kind of dark, kind of eerie stuff. I loved Eon. I think Eon is one of the most underrated and most brilliant artists ever. You know, I always loved all the sample heavy weirdness, and somehow I ended up doing quite cheerful, happy piano stuff. And I like that as well. I mean, I like a lot of things. I don't have, you know, I'm very much, is it good? Then it's good. I don't really care why it's good. If it's good, it's good. So yeah, I kind of ended up doing that. And the label, I guess the turning point was with DJ Force and the Evolution Perfect Dreams, because we until that was KF16. Until then, we kind of just did anything. We just did this and just did that, and then we put that out on 10-inch, and I really wasn't confident in it. Like, it was kind of, it wasn't cheesy, because cheese had yet to really come around, and compared to what eventually Happy Hardcore became, Perfect Dreams was downright serious. But it was definitely more piano led and vocally. And it had this great piano riff in the middle that was almost like a stamp pattern. I liked it, but I wasn't confident in it. So we just did a 10-inch and did 500 of them, and they sold in like 2 minutes. And we had been selling 500 to 1,000 of everything, and it would just kind of trickle out. We'd do like 300 or 400 first off, and then they would sell over a couple of months, and we might repress. And then we did that, and it sold instantly. And I was using Mo's Music Machine for distribution, and they phoned up and said, "We need more of these." And so I said, "Well, I was limiting it to 500, but I'll do another 500 for you. Who's counting?" So we did that, and they sold out immediately. And so we kept doing that. We kept just pressing up another 500. I don't know how many we sold eventually. It's got on the label 500 only, but I think it was about 2,500 by the end of it. But it was very obvious that struck a chord with people. And it was also very obvious that DJ Force and the Evolution were incredibly talented. I mean, they played those pianos in real time. You know, I was still at that stage where I drew a note on Cubase and I began ding, 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 ding to try and work out how a piano. They came in and they were like, and I was just like, fuck, like incredible. Like Styles and I think it was James. I can't remember, but two of them were just brilliant at the piano anyway. And DJ Force brought the kind of edgier drums and samples to it, and they were a really good group. So it's obvious they were talented and they were making good stuff. So we put that out, and then at the same point, KF18, Future Primitive had also kind of honed their sounds. They were a bit more not like slamming vinyl, but they were finding that piano-led thing. And so we did that, and that did well as well. So by the time we got to the early 20s on Kniteforce, we were basically leaning quite heavily towards the piano and uplifting tracks. And then I met Jimmy J and we set up Remix Records. And like, it kind of just, you know, and again, there was no thought in this. I'm not a person that plans ahead, really. I plan what I'm doing now and what I'm doing in about 2 or 3 days' time. And sometimes, if it's a really big thing like Knite Club, I'll plan it a couple of months in advance. But I don't have, and I never have, and I still don't have an overall plan. I don't have in 2 years' time, Kniteforce is going to be doing this. I'm just like, this is good, I'll put it out and see what happens. And then if this is good, I'll put it out and see what happens, and so on. So yeah, we just kind of ended up doing that. And it was really fun, and I really liked it. But when I look back, I think, well, no, I don't regret it. I don't really do regrets, but I do think it's a bit weird because really I would have ended up probably doing like either techno or maybe jungle. But really my stuff was, like I said, I like the dark analog bloopy. You know, maybe I should have ended up doing trance or something. I don't know. But I didn't. I ended up where I ended up, and it was all good. We had a lot of fun.
I'm glad you didn't, mate. I think the world would be a very different place if you'd gone into trance, that's for sure.
Maybe. I like such a lot of different things. Like, and I find one of the great things about the music we're in is that you can use pretty much anything. You know, I get just inspired from listening to 9 Inch Nails or Leonard Cohen or Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, or, you know, IQ records for trance, or, you know, Gabba, or there's just so many different musics, and I'll listen to it and go, oh, I wonder if we could, like at the moment, I've been listening to Tool quite a lot and listening to the way they build some of their tracks like The Pot and thinking, could you make a rave tune with that sort of build, even though you haven't got the vocals? I don't know if you can or not, but I'm going to try, and it'll probably be a disaster, but it's interesting. You know, and I think if I was doing techno, or if I got really into a different sort of music, I probably wouldn't have the freedom to sod around doing that sort of thing.
So did you ever used to do like promo mail outs and send your stuff, or was it all just get it to the shop? Right.
We used to do promo mail. It was very haphazard though, because again, I mean, I had a computer for making music, but you didn't have spreadsheets or anything. I think I had like a book with people's addresses on, and when I remembered, I would send them stuff. I still get people messaging me and saying, "Oh, you sent me a promo. I was always grateful for it." And I was like, I don't remember doing that. Got no idea. Even now, my promo mailing list is very haphazard. You get stuff fairly regularly, but you know, people say, "Oh, I'm on your mailing list," and I'm like, I don't know. I gave it to Glyn to do. I've started. That's another thing that's different now. I understand what I'm crap at. So now I just get other people who aren't crap at it to do those things, because it's just better for the label if someone else does it. Like, I'm never going to do Instagram. Like, I don't care enough. So my wife said to me, "You need to be on Instagram." I was like, I don't even know what that is. I don't know So she just set it up with a lunacy thing and then just started filming me doing stuff. And so I'm just doing that now. And then again, I got Glyn to do Kniteforce's social media and stuff because he's good at it. And I'm not. I won't bother doing it, you know. And I need other people just to force me to do it. Say, Chris, we need this. And I'll just, oh, right, there you go. Otherwise, it won't happen. So things like the mailing list and stuff like that, I just give to someone else to do. And then also I can blame them if it doesn't work.
There you go. That's always good. Always good to have a get out of jail plan.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm going to move on a little bit for Kniteforce. And I should say, if anyone wants to really dig deep into Chris's history, the book, which is the remix version of it, not the latest book, because you've got two books out now. The second book, Rave Commandments, and then the first book, what was it called again?
How to Squander Your Potential.
That's it. I can't believe I forgot the title. That was an amazing title for a book. But I thoroughly enjoyed that. So I would highly recommend anyone that hasn't read that, do dig into that, because you can really dig deep into, all the stories, throughout.
The fourth part to that, really, because so much has changed in the last 5 years. But I would feel like a egomaniac name dropping, because I've ended up working with all these amazing people. So it would just read like, and then I met Asen, and then I met the house crew. I'd just be like a really embarrassing idiot. I haven't written that yet. Maybe when it all goes wrong, I can write it.
Yeah, there you go. So let's talk about the return of Kniteforce. Because you left it for a while, and then something made you or inspired you to bring it back.
Well, it was a funny thing. I kind of drifted out of the scene a little bit, because I did Kniteforce and it was going well, and then it all went wrong in 96 or 97 because I mismanaged it. I didn't pay enough attention to the finances. I overpaid a lot of my artists, and then it quickly changed into like the more cheesy kick drum stuff, which I hated. So I just had a sulk about that, and so the label kind of went bankrupt, and I had to sell it. And that was also a disaster. A few years after selling it, I bought it back, and the guy didn't want to sell it back to me. And I said, well, you can either sell it back to me or I'll just carry on with it and you won't be able to do anything about it. So I just set up KFA, Kniteforce again. And everyone knew it was Kniteforce in everything but name. And I never called it Kniteforce, just called it KFA. And then I had all my Kniteforce artists on it. So it was so obviously Kniteforce without being Kniteforce. And then he said, oh, okay, I'll sell you the label back. So I bought it back, and then it was too late because KFA was doing great. I didn't need Kniteforce anymore, really. But
now I've got two.
Yeah. And that label kind of it was doing breakbeat stuff in the early 2000s, and it's still going now with the modern hardcore sound. But as the years went by, like, it's difficult because I don't want to sound like I'm dismissing it. I like a lot of the new modern hardcore, but it doesn't have the content that I seek for my own personal satisfaction, a lot of it, because while I love the kick drum and the speed and all that sort of stuff, there's not enough random chaos in it. It's a little bit too organized, a little bit too well produced. And so from about 2008 till about 2015, I was releasing stuff, and I liked the stuff I was releasing, and some of the artists like MP Real, still amazing music, but it wasn't really hitting me in the way I like to be hit when it comes to music. And part of that was I don't get excited about a digital file. I just don't. Like when I'm making a record now, I'm excited about the whole project. I'm excited about the look of the sleeve and the finished thing in my hand. If I spend a lot of work and at the end of it I've got an MP3 on my desktop, why bother doing artwork? It's going to be a tiny pixelated square. I don't know. It's the actual putting a record out. There's the whole thing, the feel of it. I could never. I've thought about it a million times, and I can't tell you why. It's the same reason I like a certain look on a woman. You can't say why.
Yeah.
That's what you like,
Yeah.
So then, in about 2015. Ed Jedi from Cantina Cuts, it was Jedi Records back then, he messaged me and said, oh, can I license some of your tracks to put out on vinyl? And I was like, what, are you mental? Like, why would anyone put any vinyl out? No one buys vinyl. He said, no, they do. And so I said, sure, why not? And he paid me a little advance, and I was like, look, actual money. And you never really got any money. Like digital music, even now, it makes a little bit. But Kniteforce, when I'd release a new KFA, that was the other thing. By the time it got to 2014, 2015, you'd be releasing a piece of work that the artist had worked so hard on, and you would have it digitally distributed, and it would go out there, and they would get like 15p. And I just found it really disheartening. Like, you put your heart and soul into something. I did one thing. I did an EP And I worked so hard on it, and it got in all the charts on the various stores, and I got 35 quid. And I was just like, that's not even half a day's wage. Like, I spent a month on this, and it's not about money, but that just, it's disheartening. Like, why would you do that? Like, if I want to work really hard and get no money, there's so much more satisfying work than that, you know. And I'll always love making music, but it just felt like an insult to me. So, you know, I kind of lost interest in that. And then, you know, Jedi was like, I'll pay you some money for this vinyl. And I was like, oh, well, that's nice. You can actually make some money. And again, I'm not saying, I've said this loads of times because you have to clarify, because people get the wrong impression, but it's not about money, but it is about satisfaction with your work. It is about, if you put your heart and soul into something, you want to get something back. And it is also about prioritizing your life. If you've got a life and you've got a family and you've got a mortgage, you can't afford to spend days and days on a piece of music that's going to give you 50p on a button. You've got to actually get something out of it. Otherwise, sorry, that can't be done. I've got to do real work. I've got to put food on the table. I've got to pay a mortgage. So it makes a difference. So anyway, Ed got me to put this record out, and it did well. And then he wanted to do another one. And I was like, oh, yeah, that works too. And then I said, well, can we do new stuff? So Ed said, sure, we can try it. So I redid the remixes series we did. And I did a competition, and I got some incredible artists came along and did remixes. Sonny and Deck Hussey and Ant to Be and Nicky Allen. And these things were good. This was really good music. And it was just old school, but it was really good old school, you know, and it was new old school, for want of a better phrase. We still need a better name for what we're doing. And, you know, and so those started doing well. And then in the end, I mean, see, this is just the way I'm built. I was like, well, that's doing well. Let's do all of it. So then I just put all my money into it and started going, right, well, I'm just going to release things. And then I saw that Alex Hyperon was online, and I was like, oh, great, I can try and get him to do something. And so he said he would do a remix for me, which is just like, you know, years of admiring somebody, and then they say they'll do a remix for you. That was one of the best things ever. And then the whole thing just kind of snowballed. It never occurred to me that it might not work. I was just like, I'm just going to do this, and then it will work. And
yeah,
it did, I suppose. So,
yeah, well, it has. You know, you have been a phenomenal force, pun intended, for, you know, for a multitude of things, right? You know, kind of keeping that vinyl nostalgia, tactile part of music. You know, it's our heritage, it's our foundation, it's how it all started, right? And not just for us, but, you know, for DJs many decades, you know, beforehand. But I think, you know, I've always looked at this kind of new hardcore and jungle scene, and, you know, I'm kind of with you on the name thing, but, you know, I just kind of call it just new hardcore, new jungle.
Yeah.
You know, and I've had an eye on it for a while. You know, actually, funny enough, I was going through some of my old records, and I've actually got stuff from like 2017, 2018 of like N4 records and a few other bits and pieces. And that kind of sort of blew me away a bit. And I know it's been going on longer than that. I know that that's when I basically kind of came into it.
No, I
But
don't
I
know.
really,
There were a few different attempts that didn't quite make it. There was the hardcore breaks thing for a while.
yeah.
But it was like it was trying to do hardcore, but it was not quite committed enough to it. It was like, we're going to do old school, but nicer.
Yeah,
it
I think
it was, you know, a lot of people felt they wanted to do old school, but they also felt they couldn't really do it. They had to do some new version of it. And it took till about 2017, 2018 until people said, you know what, bollocks, I'm just going to do old school because that's what I like.
Yeah,
But
I think, you know,
people were doing it properly.
Yeah, the way that I look at this is that why this kind of new wave of kind of producers, labels, artists, DJs, etc., is starting to take momentum is a very important factor in that they are inspired by that 90s sound. They're taking that inspiration, making their own interpretation of it, and then moving it forward. You know, you can't just, you know, as much as I would, you know, as much as I with a burning passion look back at that era with music, and it will always be my favorite music, hands down, till the day I die. But that was then, And actually, I've only really recently, like in the last couple of years, kind of said that, because I've always been very nostalgic on that side. But actually, for a scene to move forward, it's got to physically move forward in that kind of musical sense. And this is why I think, you know, the kind of Reapers and the Time Tunnels and the Night Forces, you know, the list goes on and on and on. You know, they're really nailing that authenticity of that sound, but it's continuing the story. You know,
Yeah.
I look back and I think, you know, and this is why I was interested to ask about that, your perception of that scene and that 92 to 93 kind of era, or a few years either side. You know, the tempo and styles moved at breakneck speed. You know, if you look at that kind of sort of tango ratty kind of dark side, you know, me and my mates used to call it haunted hardcore for some reason, but that clearly didn't stick. But, you know, a lot of these different styles never really had time to breathe. You know, even that kind of Bookhamish kind of sound really was quite unique-ish to kind of good looking. So the fact that V&R and other labels and artists, you know, Mokes and Omni Music and those guys, they're really harnessing that kind of atmospheric sound. You know, you've got people like Time Tunnel again that are taking that kind of more jungle techno, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You know, they're taking all these little pockets and styles and genres and going, right, we've not had enough of this. Like, I've got my pen, I'm going to continue writing this story. And it's done with authenticity, and that is absolute key for me. And you know, I think it's a super exciting time for this kind of new wave of music.
It really is. And there's it's interesting as well, because what I would tell artists has also changed. When I was first doing it, when I first started releasing Kniteforce again, what I would say to people, and I remember having a conversation with Asen about it, because Asen did his play release, and it was really good, but it was kind of I mean, everything Asen does is good. It's just that's where it starts off. It starts off as good and then it gets better. But it was also a little bit not quite hitting the target, because I think he was trying to do like a new thing while wanting to do an old thing. So at first, when we were talking about it, I was like, just do the old thing, you know, because the old thing was good and everyone wants the old thing. And then as the years went by, it's now no longer that. It's like, okay, we did the old thing. Where can we go from there without going where we went before? You know,
Yeah,
so that's the tricky bit. And the good thing about it is, with all these different labels, whether you're talking about Overshadow or VNR, or whether you're talking about individual artists like Blame, or, you know, I think everyone's on the same page there with the stuff like that Blue Skin Badger does, that Time Tunnel's doing, where they've all gone to the same thing and said, I like that. I like what we used to do. I like the sound of that. So I now have the choice. I can either make stuff that doesn't push it forward. And for the record, I don't think you do have to push forward. This music has been around long enough that we are quite entitled to be our own version of classic rock. Classic rock doesn't go anywhere that rock hasn't already done. It's just doing what was good in the 70s and people like it, so keep doing it. So I have no problem as an artist. If you just want to keep making old school without pushing it forward, that's fantastic. But the interesting thing for me, and for a lot of old school heads like Asen and Housecrew and people like that, is they've done that and they love doing it. How can you go forward from there? And that's where the excitement is in the new production. Without losing that original vibe and sound, what can you do? So I just think that's a fascinating place for a musician to be, especially if you've been making music for a long time, because it's a challenge and it's intriguing, and you don't want to lose that feeling that you used to have, because it's such a lovely feeling when you're making an old school tune and you've got that vibe. Like when I was in the studio with Jimmy J recently, it was just beautiful. Like I hadn't seen him for decades and I didn't know how we'd get on. And he came to the studio and it was exactly like the old days, only better, because I wasn't such an arrogant dickhead. And back in the day, I really was difficult in the studio because I just, for no reason at all, I assumed I knew best, right? And quite often I really didn't know best. And Jimmy would say, do this. And I would go, no, just because I didn't want to, you know? And then I would do something and he would be going, that's too weird. You're making it weird. Stop it. And so I would have to take it out and I would get quite angry about it. But now, like, I'm much more in tune to it and much more willing to be like told what to do and stuff like that. And, you know, I guess I don't have that ego that I used to have. I don't know, because I don't really know why I was like that in the past. But it was so wonderful just to make music with my friend, you know, and just to make me be on the same level. And we don't have to, like with Jimmy J and Crawley, we don't have to cut new ground. It's just nice just to make good stuff again. And the new stuff we've made, I think, is the best of our career. And if we were making it back in 94, 95, I think the tunes we've just made for our new release would be massive anthems. As it is, they will come out and they will do whatever they do. That's fine. But it's really nice to be in that position as a producer where you get those options. You know, you can just do what you like, and you can do more than you used to do. Like, because even back in the day, if you were, say, the house crew, or, you know, even me as Lunacy, you were kind of stuck. I couldn't just suddenly do a really dark jungle tune as Lunacy. I tried. No one bought it because that wasn't what they wanted, because Lunacy did piano stuff. Do you know what I mean? Whereas now, people would be like, yeah, go for it. You've got a lot more options. People just want to hear old school music. I can literally go in the studio and do anything from like 125 BPM to 190 BPM. I can do any style I like: jungle, drum and bass, jungle techno, gabba, old school, like Euro, and people are up for it because they just want that old school sound. So it's a much better place, I think. I think most producers, you get to do what they like, and that's all you really want to do as a musician, is do what you like. And because you're authentically doing that, it's why Deep Jungle's doing great music. It's why Overshadow's doing great music. Overshadow and Kniteforce have got almost nothing in common with style of sounds, but we're exactly the same in attitude, where we're both like, let's do the thing that we like, and let's put out.
And you know what? That is the key thing. It's that focal synergy on what is wanted to be achieved in that, and it's the same across all of these, but individual people and labels are picking their own one. You know, Deep Jungle, I've got to send a massive shout out to Lee. Like, I'm absolutely in awe of that label, of what they're doing. Like, he's just absolutely nailing it, and at every release he keeps bringing up, I'm like, how are you doing this? And you know, I've got to know Lee, you know, over the last couple of years, and he's like, just love doing it, so I'm just going to do what I love and put it out, and that's it. It's really that simple, and it's so refreshing. You know, there's no agenda, there's no one to answer to, there's no quota, there's no like, oh, I've got to fit this and I've got to do that. He's like, if I like a tune, I'll just go and bang it out, make it gets released.
Yeah, and that is exactly what we used to do back in the day, and it's what gives me so much hope for the scene, is because I have all this. It's not competition, and it's not. It's inspirational, but I don't feel like I'm competing with anyone. I feel like that everybody's got something to say, and we're not all doing the same thing. You know, Blueskin Badger isn't like Time Tunnel. Time Tunnel isn't like Kniteforce. Kniteforce isn't like Deep Jungle. Deep Jungle isn't like Overshadow. You know, we're all just doing our thing. And really, you've got it's exactly like it was back in the day, only a lot less labels. Because you used to have, you'd have a whole bunch of jungle labels over here and a whole bunch of hardcore labels over here. And, you know, the only difference is there's less labels and they're all together. And I really hope it stays like that. I hope there's more labels, but it stays like that, where we're all together. Because that's why it was so great back in the day. That was when it was best. The worst thing that happens now is that it becomes Overshadow over here and they're doing their own thing, and the people who listen to that don't listen into anything else, and Kniteforce over here and they're doing their own thing and no one's listening to, you know, that immediately ruins it. So I really hope that doesn't happen. I'll do everything I can to stop that from happening, because that's how the scene is glorious, when you've got all the different things in it.
Yeah, and I think that is the key success for a scene to move forward. You know, there isn't enough room for everyone to be running off in their own directions. They can do, obviously, with, you know, a certain, you know, musical styles, but, you know, I look at it from a DJ's perspective, and I just look at a bunch of amazing labels and producers and go, you know, this is all part of my pot. You know, sure, people sitting in the seat of a label see it differently, because you're so engrossed in what's going on, and you're looking around going, right, they're doing that, they're doing this, but, you know, I've got to focus on that. But, you know, I'd like to think that from a kind of music fans perspective, that is also how it's seen. You know, and I see a lot of it online. You know, people that are buying VNR, you know, are also buying Deep Jungle, they're also buying Blueskin Badger. You know, there's this kind of community that is seeing and loving where all of these different types of labels and producers are taking their own interpretation of that classic sound and doing their thing with it.
But this is why, and it isn't just blowing smoke, but this is why what you're doing is so important, Jay, because as I mentioned, like again in the Rave Commandments book, the DJ and the pirate DJs and the home DJs back in the day, they were the ambassadors of the music. They were the ones that curated it and showed everyone, and they weren't stuck in a style. Like when you listen to pirate radio, you'd hear Sons of Luke the Luke Far Out, and you'd hear Tango and Ratty, and you would hear all these different things, because the DJs back then, there was a lot of them, there was a lot more labels, and you didn't have that insidious thing that slowly happened where all the DJs just played the music from their own label. And I understand why it happened, but it was a shit thing to happen, because it meant that the DJs now only represented themselves. And you can't, and if the labels aren't varied and the DJ only represents the label, you end up with a tunnel of a sound, and it's boring. And that's why, you know, it all falls to pieces. Back in the day, I mean, again, I mention this because it's so important. A label like XL, you would hear Pneumatic and you would hear SL2 and you would hear Setup System, and they were all completely different. Or you go to Production House and you'd hear DJ Solo, Brothers Grimm, and Athan, and they were all completely different. Or, you know, you could say it for the same of all the labels back then. You go to Moving Shadow and you'd hear Hyperon Experience, Omni Trio, and Mixed Race, all completely different, you know? And that meant that when people were buying the music, they would keep hearing different stuff. By the time it got to like later years, you had the various labels, and you know, I don't want anyone to think I'm criticizing them, because I'm not, because we all did it. But Remix Records and Kniteforce, we did a certain sound, and Ram Records, they did a certain sound, and you know, and it became quite narrow. And even that was fine when you still had 700 labels. But when that started narrowing down to less labels, and each label is just representing the same sound, and they've got a DJ who only plays one label, it all just gets kind of rubbish and boring. So it really is a thing where the labels have to make sure they've got variety on them, and then the DJs have to make sure they're playing variety. And you're one of the best at it, because you've managed to make a central place which everyone goes to. And so I get to hear stuff that I might not otherwise hear, because I wouldn't hear it from some of the DJs that play nowadays, because they will just play their thing, whereas you'll play quite a big variety. And it's like, it's so important. It's like, I don't know if there's many things more important than that at this point. For our scene to grow, there has to be people that are playing all of it. Otherwise,
and you know, it's important for me to just shine a light on it, on everything that's going on. And I've always done that throughout all the radio shows. I remember when I was doing Kiss, the breakbeat scene at the time was kind of getting flooded a little bit with bootlegs, because it was an easy 500 quid advance to make. It was cash, it was done, they were easy to churn out. I'm pretty sure in the 4 years that I did that weekly show, I maybe played one bootleg, because for me it was like, well, I'm going to support, you know, people that are making the effort to make original music. And that kind of psyche is translated into this style this time around, because it's about, well, actually, I love some amazing stuff that Brent's doing on Vinyl Phonetics, or Eamon, you know, brother at 130, but I'm loving what these guys are doing at 174. And so, you know, every show will start off around 130 and ends at 174. There's probably a good chunk that's around the kind of 160 mark in the middle. But, you know, as I think it's important, right, that people hear all different styles and understand that it's not just, and again, I'm not saying this absolutely disrespectfully, Tim Reaper's smashing it, but it's not just Tim. There's these guys and there's those guys and there's other people doing it. And if someone that loves Tim comes into the show and then discovers another 4 artists, win. That for me is like, you know, the best thing that I could ever achieve.
That's exactly it. And I have the same attitude with, like, that's how I run my label, basically. I always think it's weird when record labels tell artists what to do anyway. I've had various, I'd say, what do you want for the label? I'm like, do your thing. I'm not going to tell Athan how to make a track. I'm not going to, you know, like, he knows what to do. Just go ahead and do it. It'll be good. I trust that you'll be good at it, you know, and it's, you know, and so with Kniteforce, I will happily put out something that's dark and jungly or slow or fast. I use Kniteforce. I've got all the different subsidiary labels which are a little bit more specialized. But for Kniteforce, literally, is it rave music and is it good? And that's the entire criteria. So it can be anything from 130 BPM to 190. As long as it's good, it can go out, you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes I do things and I think, well, I don't know about this, but I feel like it should go out. And then I just do it anyway. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Because that's the other thing it's important to remember is you really don't know. You have your personal opinion. And there's things that I really like that other people don't, and there's things that were huge that I just didn't get into at all. You know, so I'm always very aware that I might like or dislike something, but I could be absolutely wrong and have the wrong opinion of it. But I look at that as a reason to take a gamble. If I don't know, it's worth it. You know, so
I think if you're putting and I think again, it's really important to be supporting that next generation of producers as well as working, cultivating and guiding them as and where needed, but ultimately letting them do their own thing, but having them sit alongside the legends as well. This brings me on to one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about was, the box sets, right? So, obviously 12s, 10s been around for forever and ever. But you have done some amazing things with these box sets, not just kind of remastering some of those classic tracks from a variety of artists and back catalogue from back in the day, but also providing kind of upfront remixes from, kind of bleepy, acidy stuff to hardcore to jungle to all over it. Talk to me about the first box set and what was the kind of idea behind getting these out there.
Well, that was a bit of a risk. I mean, that was Athan. I think I mentioned it before. Athan sent me. I was just working at home doing something, and we've been talking about stuff. And then he said, "Do you want to hear a new trip to the moon I've done?" But I was like, "Yes, I do want to hear that." Like, why? Are you serious? Are you just winding me up? So he sent me it, and I played it, and it was just. There's very few things I can't really compare the feeling for that. To be hearing a new version of a tune by the original artist all these years later. So he sent me that, and I was just like, well, this is obviously brilliant. Can we put out like the rest of them? And I said, again, I don't have I tend to just trust my instincts. I couldn't have told you why I thought a box set would be a good idea, because it really wasn't a good idea. Because now you have to pay for 5 records, and that's expensive. And you've got to get an actual box, which hadn't been designed. I didn't know what to do or how to do that, and that's difficult. And then I've got to try and work out how to put all this stuff together, and that's also difficult. And then I looked through Discogs, and I didn't really read it properly, but the represses and stuff or the old versions of Trip to the Moon didn't seem particularly valuable. But that's because I didn't look properly. Because what I should have done was actually look at the prices, but it said, the average was like £10, and that's because they also sell on CD. And if you actually looked at the vinyl, they were quite valuable, but I didn't know that. So I said to Ace, and I just feel like we could do something special with this and do a box set. I said, but I've got no idea if it will work. And Asen said, go on then, let's see what happens. So again, like I do, I just went, all right, I'll do that then. So I got the records cut, and we got a box done. And I thought, well, I'm going to have to press 500 because you can't do 300 of something that small, that big. And at the time, we really didn't know. And when we were getting ready to release it did seem people were interested, but it's very hard to tell. It's like when you do an advert on Facebook and like 10,000 people like it, and then only one person shows up. You can't really tell from online chatter. A lot of people say, yeah, I'm going to do this, but it doesn't actually happen. So then we put it for sale, and it just sold out in the space of like a couple of hours. And before that, it's funny when you look back, me and Asen I was saying to him, look, mate, I hope this works. And if it doesn't, don't feel bad. I think it was something we should have tried anyway. And he was like, well, as long as we sell 200 or 250, I'll be happy. And we were both just like, well, we'll see what happens. It all sold out. And we ended up, we've got to repress on it again. And I think we're going to end up doing about 2,000 of that box set, which is a phenomenal amount of sales. We absolutely didn't anticipate it. It wasn't, there was no big master plan. It was just like, let's try this, see what happens. And it, obviously it went well. So I thought it's a nice thing to be able to do. I know some people say, oh, can't you just do singles? And I get that. But a box set gives you the financial abilities that a single doesn't. Like if you're doing a box set, it means you can employ 3 or 4 different remixers and pay them a nice remix fee to get some really exceptional things done, which you can't do on a single because a single doesn't cover the costs of it. So it allows you to, take the Shades of Rhythm box set. We've got Alternate, Blame, Nookie, and the House Crew. And those 4 artists all remixing on one project. If you put that on a single, that single is going to make a massive loss. And I don't mind making a loss. I've never been money motivated, and I've made plenty of losses doing idiotic things because it's funny. But you just couldn't do that. You just couldn't do that. Like the way I do my business, I never think, will this make money? I think, is it a good idea? Then I do it. And then usually it makes money and it does well. Sometimes it doesn't, but I'm fine with that because I had a great time doing it anyway. So, and so it's a hard line to draw. Like with the DJ solo releases we've coming up, we didn't do a box set. We kept those as 3 singles because I know not everybody wants a box set. But certain releases, I mean, if you're doing Shades of Rhythm, that's a box set. If you're doing House Crew, that's a box set. Like you can't be like, here's one single from the House Crew, like, or from NRG. These are artists with an epic amount of work who have done genre and rave defining music. You put that on a set, you have to, or that's how I feel. Like I couldn't not. So I don't really question it. So that's how they came about, just because we thought it would be fun, and then it was. And I like fun, so I keep doing it. It seems like a terrible reason to do things, but it's really not. Like, what's the point of life? Doing things that make you happy and that are fun.
Yeah, I think again that it's also about timing, right? And I think the compliment of getting the remixes done, whether it be established people like House Crew, Blame, etc., or it's someone like Pete Cannon. I still
Pete Cannon
really,
is absolutely unique. Like Pete Cannon, I mean, I don't understand how he has the energy at all, because he's just constantly doing all these things. But that's another thing I wanted to bring up. Like, again, with Kniteforce, we're about to release a new record from Ramos, who's obviously a big name, and he's going right at the same time it's coming out. We've got a release on Kniteforce by Renegade Bob Ross, who no one's ever heard of. But he's starting to get known, but he's not on the same level as far as that goes. But his music is, the things that he's doing, like some of the music he's given to me to put out, is absolutely jaw-droppingly brilliant. There's a lot of producers that are doing that sort of stuff. Ant2B and Wislov, Sonny and Deck Hussey. There's all these people that are doing great things, and on other labels too, New Killer, on Time Tunnel, and so on and so forth. So that's another thing that I like to do with Kniteforce. I want to put the House Crew right next to an Ant2B release, because it's not just about, I've never been that interested. That's not the right way to put it. I love a repress. Nothing wrong with a repress. But repressing music and just going with big names is a dead end, because eventually there's going to be no more things to repress. Like, it's already reaching that point where there's very few things now that you can't get repressed. There's still some holy grails where people want, to get them. But eventually that's going to be done. So it's a dead end. At the end of the day, that's over. So my interest has always been on new music, and I want new music from the old school heads like Liquid and NRG, and I want new music from the new people, because the new people and the old people doing new music is where the future lies. So it really does make a lot of difference that you put those on the same level and give them the same chances. And it's not, don't get me wrong, I'm not being nice. I'm not doing them a favor. The Renegade Bob Ross release is one of my favorites that we're putting out. And there's, if it's on Kniteforce, like some of the stuff by Abyss, if it's on Kniteforce, it's because I think that it is worthy of being on our premiere label and that everyone should pay attention to it. Now, everyone might not agree because they haven't got the same taste as me, and I might be wrong for all I know. But my perspective is one where I want to shine a light on all these things. I want you to hear Asen's new tune, Champion. Of course I do. But if you're looking there, I also want to say, by the way, look at this new thing from Ant2B. Look at this new thing from Sonny and Deck Hussey. Look at this new thing from Paul Bradley, because it's fucking excellent. And I know you came here for Asen, but there's this, and you shouldn't miss it. So I want to
100%
all those things.
And that's why I think it's worked. The timing of those new artists that are coming through and the quality of music that they're making. I remember you sent me the Asen box set before it came out, and I remember listening to it. And generally, I kind of listen to stuff and I try and listen to it as much as I can. But there's a lot of music and blah blah blah.
Yeah,
that was, I remember the first time in a long time where I just was listening to stuff from like start to finish. And I think the Pete Cannon remix of Life and Crimes of a Roughneck, I must have listened to that 4 times. And in all honesty, because when I know when something, and again the hairs are going off, when I love something that much, I just laugh. I can't. If I start laughing, then I know it's done. It's the same when the Secret Squirrel remix. that you sent me. I listened to it on loop about 4 or 5 times, and I'm walking down the street laughing my head off. People looking at me thinking, "What the fuck's he doing? He looks insane." But and that I love still feeling that, but I can get that with new artists. DJ Stefano, oh God, I can't remember the name of the bloody track. I think you released it like a year ago. I'm still playing it. It's phenomenal. It's like absolutely. That's the one.
It's one of the many, many delayed records. God, it's driving me nuts. But that should have been here a year ago, but we're still waiting for it. Yeah, Stefano, fantastic stuff as well. He's another one that's approaching the music with the same attitude of what can I do today? So when he sends me a new thing, I don't know what I'm going to get. And not all of it. I don't love all of it, but all of it is worth hearing, And that's the difference between a good artist. But I don't judge it by do I like it. I judge it by I like some of this, and the rest of it is on par, even if I don't like it. And I have got some prolific artists like Bino who does a wide range of different things, and that's what I like best, because there'll be stuff that I like and stuff that I don't. Ross Fader's another one. He sends me some stuff and it's quite challenging, and I'm not sure if it's really the sort of thing I want to do. And then I think, well, it is amazing though, so let's see. And then you just try it. In the end, the worst thing that can happen is you put a record out and it doesn't sell. So what?
Yeah, I think you're
going out. It's worth going out.
You're in a good position, and you might argue this with me in the sense that you can take a few more risks, because it's not a lot of labels are putting out once every 2 months, sometimes much longer than that. Obviously we're not going to go into the boring delays of records. There's been many people that have explained what's going on there, but the fact that you're juggling so many releases, there's that, I can take a risk. And that's important that we've got people like that in the scene, because we do, again, for a scene to progress forward, it can't just be a group of people all shuffling forwards in a line. There's got to be more people coming in. There was, I've been involved in a scene that did, the top guys did hold court. And I know the Warren, I've spoke to them all face to face about it for many, many years. And new artists kind of did get to a certain level, but it was very hard to go any further. And I remember seeing this interview with Andy C once, and the question was something along the lines of, aren't you worried that these new producers or DJs are going to come and take over you? And he's like, absolutely not, the opposite. I want to bring as many of them in as possible to keep me challenged, to keep me on my toes, so that I can keep pushing myself forward. And Brand Records, obviously, history tells itself. So it's important that we're doing it, and I think it's amazing to be able to put those guys in with all of those, legends of the scene that are still contributing, a huge amount towards music now. So hats off to you, mate, for that.
It's a balance thing, because it all depends. My attitude is very much the artist's opinion is priority. So I feel like a lot of record labels think that their opinion is more important than the artist's opinion, and I don't understand that. All you do is put the music out. You're not the creator. The creator of the music should get final say. So it very much depends on what the artist does. For example, when I suggested to Johnny L that Ant to Be did a remix, Johnny L was like, yeah, that'd be great. He wasn't like, who's Ant to Be? Because he doesn't know who he is. But Johnny L has got a very open attitude to that sort of thing. Other artists only want established names, and neither of those are right or wrong, because it's your own music, and how you feel about your own music is priority. So if you feel that you've made a piece of music and you don't want other people interfering with it unless they've got a pedigree, that's a totally justifiable attitude to have. And it's not my job to say to somebody who feels like that, no, we're getting a remix by Joe Bloggs, who you've never heard of, because they need an opportunity. I don't think that's how it works at all. Joe Bloggs has to prove himself good enough to be wanted in that arena. At the same time, I will make sure Joe Bloggs gets every opportunity I can give him. So if like some artists are very relaxed about it, and some are less so, and some are very strict about it, and whatever they want is fine. But for every whenever there's an artist who's relaxed about it, then I say to them, well, how about this person? Because this person's doing really good stuff. And you know, as long as you mix it up and keep it interesting. And I just, so it got to be that Ant to Be managed to remix I'll Be There by Baraka, which is one of the biggest tunes ever. And it's great to be able to give him that opportunity, and he absolutely knocked it out of the park. But it's a balancing act where you kind of have to get it right, and you have to do what the artist wants. And generally, I find that works out well. Everybody's happy then. I try to create an opportunity, but not at the expense of the artist's personal taste, because then you're just achieving nothing. No one wants to be told what to do with their music. I don't. I'm very easy with mine. Like, I don't really care. Someone does a good remix, brilliant, because I make my piece of music and I finish it, and then I'm bored. That's just the way I'm built. As soon as I've finished it, I don't care anymore, really. The process of making it is what interests me. Other people don't feel that way. So really, I regard my job as kind of a facilitator. I don't, my job is to put music out and to put good music out and to let it do its thing. The other thing I'd say is, when you were talking about variety and stuff, when you look at the tunes that have got really big and famous, they're always ones that didn't do the normal thing. They're always weird. 31 Seconds was weird as shit when that came out. The Terminator, that was a weird tune with the weird drums in it. All the tunes that
well, that's actually the Terminate one is actually kind of well documented, that it actually was clearing dance floors. Goldie has said it and Groove Rider said it when he first played it at Rage. People just went, what's going on? And it took a good while for it to actually click on. So yeah, you're spot on there.
Yeah, so I think when I hear something strange, like when someone sends me something and I'm like, that's really peculiar, my next thought is almost always, I should put it out. Because 9 times out of 10, it disappears without a trace. But it only takes 1 time out of 10 and you've changed the whole game. So,
Yeah.
I don't regard that as much of a risk. And you can hedge your bets as well. If someone sends me something really weird, you can go, all right, well, that's strange. We will make that the B side. We can be a bit more conservative with the A side. There's no harm in that. As long as the artist's happy doing it.
Yeah,
happy
100%. Yeah. Well, look, because I am.
Sorry, just one more thing. As for getting big within the scene, I do think one of the problems, like with hardcore especially, you've heard it, no one ever manages to get in the big names anymore. But that's to do with size. When a scene's small, the people who have already made it are going to stay at the top. There's no room for other people to get in. So the duty of the people at the top isn't to make room for the others in that sense. The duty of the people at the top is to give as many opportunities as possible so that the scene can grow, so that there's space for other people to be there. It's not my job to get out of the way. It's my job to make more room. And those are two different things. So I think
100%.
people see it. They're like, they're the gatekeepers of the scene. They're only a gatekeeper because the scene is quite small. Once you've got a bigger scene, there's loads of gates and no one's keeping them. So that's the job, really, to make things bigger.
Yeah, 100%. So, because I am conscious of time, so before we wrap things up, I do want to talk about Knite Club, the first rule.
We were going to talk about that, and it's now been an hour and 3/4 later.
So I remember when you first started talking to me about this night, but I just, I'd love everyone to just understand. You've been running a record label for like nearly 3 decades, or 3 decades now, right? Why now? Why Knite Club? What's your kind of approach, and what was your reasoning behind it?
Like everything I do, it's sort of selfish. I always just do things that I think would be fun. And I thought, like, a lot of people were saying you should do an event, and I was like, eh. And then somebody said to me, you should call it Knite Club. And that struck me as funny, because that's just funny, isn't it, to call a rave nightclub? When I thought, well, nobody else can call it that. Like, we can call it that, and that's justifiable because it's Kniteforce and it's going to be at a club. So that's funny. So immediately that made me laugh. And then I thought, well, this is just a good excuse to see all my friends and, like, have a good time. And the other thing is, on a more slightly Machiavellian sense, all the people that I'm working with, I like them and I want to earn them money, and they want to do events, and then they put music out with me, and it just becomes a nice circle of things where you're all just helping each other out. So I thought, all right, we'll do an event. And like a bit like the box set with Asen, it started off as a little idea, and then it all got really out of control really fast. So we were originally going to do just like a 300 to 500 event, and we couldn't find a suitable venue. And then we found one, and they just messed around and clowned about. And then a few people, the lowercase and my wife Cindy, they started looking for other venues, and they came across the Scala, which is obviously too big because it can do like 1,000 people. And I know Chris Orange from, Chris Isotonic from Orange, and I knew he was doing an event at the Scala. So again, I think it's important people are respectful. So I spoke to him first and said, look, we might be doing this event. And the venue we're considering is the Scala, but you've got your one going on. So will that be okay? Well, I didn't want to, tread on the toes of someone who I deeply respect. And he said, yeah, of course. And then he kind of gave them a good word about me because we've worked together on his Isotonic releases. So then suddenly I'd booked the Scala and I was like, well, now I'm going to have to do something. So I thought, well, I haven't met Asen. Like, I've been working with him for years and I haven't met him. So he was my first one. I got to get him down. And when he said he could make it, I was like, all right, good. So then I started just asking all my friends. NRG was up for it. Hyperon was up for it. Ray Keith was, because all these people I've got to know over the years, And then I thought, well, because again, I always just do things over the top, right? Because this is what excites me. You see, I can never be conservative with things because that's boring. I want to do an event where I've just got all the people that I really love and admire playing. So I got Shades of Rhythm because we were doing a box set, and I thought that's a good idea, because I love their stuff. I can't wait to hear it. Of course, I'm completely forgetting that as the promoter, I'm not going to hear any of it. I'm just going to run about going, but, so I thought we'll get Shades of Rhythm, and then I thought, well, that's way too many DJs and musicians already, so I might as well ask Alternate if I'm going to do that. So I thought, because at some point you have to say, well, that's ridiculous and over the top. You might as well carry on.
It would be like by the way, everyone's got 3.5 minute sets each.
Well, you see, that's another thing I didn't want to do. I don't like those smaller sets. I want to have an hour set. As a DJ, 45 minutes, you just start getting into and it stops. I don't know why. It's only 15 minutes different, but it's just not as good. So I've tried to keep an hour set for everyone. My only regrets really is that I couldn't get House Crew to play because House Crew were doing at the Orange before, or the Criminal Minds. Both of those I wanted, but I didn't want to match the lineup with the Orange, which is on the 28th of August. So they will be playing at the next one, which I'm already planning. And of course, I wanted people like you and Pete, and just all these people that I respect and admire, and just seemed like a great idea to have a good party. And then, so I started doing that, and I'm very lucky. The people that buy Kniteforce are so supportive. As soon as I put the tickets up, we sold a huge amount just instantly with no real information. And I've got people coming from New Zealand and America and Australia and Japan and Germany. And it's very flattering. I kind of think they must be mad, but then that's okay because I'm a bit strange myself. But, so there's all these people coming, and it's just, I really hope I get to enjoy it. And I hope everything goes smoothly, not because, obviously you want it to go smoothly, but there's so many people that I've got customers who I've been talking to for years who are flying in, and I want to be able to give them the time of day. I want to be like, hey, how's it going? Instead of just being like, ah. So I'm hoping we'll do that. And the ticket sales are going fantastic, and I think we're going to sell out before the last day. So that's good. Yeah.
Nice. Well, if you want to get your tickets, let's get the link on the page.
See, this is the sort of thing I'm rubbish at. What we should have been doing, and what a normal person would be doing, is spend this whole time trying to sell tickets. Instead, we just had a conversation. I personally think that's much better. It's a much more fun life. So.
No, I agree. I don't know if we would have got to nearly 2 hours if we just talked about trying to sell tickets. That's for sure.
No, it would have been boring as well.
Yeah, I can't wait, mate. I'm really looking forward to it. I know you've got some great surprises lined up. Yeah, you're not going to hear it. You're going to be running around like a headless chicken everywhere.
I'm going to try and make sure I hear at least 5 or 10 minutes of everyone's set, and like everyone's just going to have to wait. But the good thing is, you see, one of the great things that I love about this scene as it is that almost all the big names and all the people involved have been through the mill and come out the other side, and they haven't got any time for any bullshit, but they understand the way the world is. So when you're talking to somebody like Ray Keith, obviously you're spending time with a legend in the scene, but he knows that you're doing an event, so you might have to go, sorry, Ray, got to go and do something, and he won't be offended by that. So it's just nice to be working with all these people who are both nice people, but they're consummate professionals. They've been there, they've done that. So it makes for a good time, you know. And then I've got the Kniteforce radio crew coming down. I haven't met a load of those. It's just going to be brilliant just to hang out with people like Alki D, who I've known since '92, and people like Cunning, who I've never met. You know, I've never met Asen. I've been working with him for years. I've met Pete Cannon only once or twice and admired his hair as he flew past. You know, you and him can have hair off.
I've long conceded that he's #1 hairdo.
What was that movie with Blue Steel and all that? You'll have to have you have a good battle.
I thought you were going to say something about Mary.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just going to be great. I really looking forward just to hanging out with old friends and meeting new friends, you know. And there's loads of people coming down who are just, you know, I don't want to say it, but it's just flattering that they're coming down. There's a few old legends that are just coming just for the party, that's just lovely, you know.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to checking the tunes out, meeting loads of people, and there's a good few people that listen to the show. I think we're going to try and arrange to meet up in a pub around the corner for a couple of beers beforehand. But yeah, I'm in for the night and get in there as early as possible, and you can peel me out of there at 5 in the morning.
I wanted to show you some of the. See, this is the sort of thing that I do, which is if I went to a bank and said this is my business plan, they would say, "Don't do that." So we've got Knite Club soap because I thought it would be funny as people leave. You know, you've been at a rave, you're probably a bit sweaty. Here's a little goodie bag with some soap, and then I thought we'd do a double CD as well. You know, these are just things we're giving away. This is an absolute waste of money because, I mean, I suppose it's a bribe. Maybe it's a bribe. I don't know. But this is an absolute waste of money, really. I just think it's a fun thing to do. We've got, you know, those ridiculous American foam pointy hands.
Yeah.
We've got a bunch of those with Knite Club on them, so we can all dance around with big, stupid, pointy hands. I mean, because I think that's funny and I think people will have fun doing it. So these are the sort of things, you know, where, like, even if we sell the club out, I won't make any money, but it's going to be such a brilliant night. You know, it's worth it. It's worth it. Maybe
absolutely.
The 5th one or the 6th one will actually make some profit, but until then, we can just have a good time, you know.
Yeah, I'm hearing some great buzz about it. Honestly, mate, it's definitely the event of the year for me. I'm looking forward to. So I cannot wait to get down there and catch a few people and have a nice little social and play a few records while we're at it.
I would say for anybody who's watching this and umming and ahhing about tickets, you really should. I know everyone goes, "Oh, we're going to sell out," but most people are lying because we have to say that. That's part of being PR. The records are running out. You've got to get in. It's like that thing. But everybody's telling me, because again, this is kind of a bit mad, but this is sort of my first event. I've done others, but I've always had someone holding my hand. Like I've had King Size help me with one, and I had the Elation Boys help me do Night Fever back in the day. This is the first one I've done on my own. So it's sort of a bit terrifying to, like, let's do your first rave at the Scala with 1,000 people or whatever. But you know, our PR guy and everyone says it's looking really good and it's probably going to sell out before the doors open. So yeah, I mean, it does sound like a hard pitch, but if you are thinking about it, you should get your tickets now because I think it is going to sell out, and it should, because that's a lineup that you can't beat. That lineup really for variety and old school.
No, it is ridiculous. Let's do it that way. There you go. Look at that. It is absolutely insane. And I think obviously, I think a lot of people guessed the final 2 surprise guess. I think the little tagline underneath was definitely a nice little helping hand there to get it. But even, you know, without looking Ray Keith, it was a mental lineup, and now you've been able to officially announce those 2. I mean, you'd be mad to miss it, really, wouldn't you?
I think so. And I also think, see, this is the thing. If I'm going to do a rave, I want to do a rave with the ethos of the label, which is a load of variety and a lot of different acts with different styles. Because I don't want a boring rave. I like the old raves where you could move from room to room. I set it up so that the DJs in the main room are on the hour, and the DJs in room 2 are every half an hour. So that you can go between the 2. You don't just have to miss somebody. You know,
yeah.
I want everybody to be able to hear all of it. I know that's impossible. If I could, I'd do a tape pack. I did think about it, an actual tape pack.
Yeah, proper old school business.
And then I realised I haven't got a cassette machine. So
Not many people do.
If I only do it in a selfie play for myself, there's no point in doing it, is there? Because I won't get to enjoy it.
All right. Well, look, there's one more thing that I want to just talk to you about. But before we do, we've got a nice little juicy competition. I don't think I even mentioned this, but we're going to give some stuff away, right?
Yep. Yeah, we've got some good stuff to give away. Although it hasn't actually arrived yet, but I'm expecting any day to have the 6 vinyl Shades of Rhythm promo test presses. So we're going to give that away to someone. There's only going to be 1 copy of that because my new pressing plant only gives me 5 copies, and Shades of Rhythm wants 3, and I'm having 1, and that just leaves 1. So
I'll be entering the competition.
I'll probably give you my copy then, Jay, because I know you like.
No, God no.
I don't really.
I'm gonna bug Nick and Lanx and say, "Come on, there's 2 of you. You don't need 3 copies."
Yeah, well, good luck with that. They have asked. Anyway, so, yeah, and then obviously a couple of guest lists for Knite Club. And what was the other thing? We talked about it earlier, and I've
forgotten. The book, Rave Commandments book.
This is why I'm a rubbish salesman. It's why I have other people do it. Oh yeah, my book. Yeah. Although that we've only got. Look, that's all of the ones we've got left. So.
Wow.
Yeah. And these will be in the bargain bucket.
We'll keep those. All right. So I'm going to keep this super simple. And, as with all competitions, I like to be able to make sure everyone that's listening live can take part in it, but also anyone that's listening on the podcast as well. So we'll keep it open until next Tuesday. And all you need to do is either go to the YouTube channel after this is finished or the Facebook channel and tag any one of the DJs that is playing at Knite Club on 17th of September at Scala in London. So if you want to win, to recap that, if you want to win 2 guest lists to Knite Club, it's going to be a super rare, only 1 of 5 TP copies of the Shades of Rhythm box set, and Chris's brand new Rave Commandments book. All you need to do, wait till the live stream's finished on either YouTube or Facebook and just tag any one of the DJs or name any one of the DJs that's playing at the event, and I'll pick a winner. We'll pick a winner next Tuesday.
Sounds like a good plan.
Done. So let's finish.
That's the Tuesday coming, like in a couple of. Sorry, I'm very bad with dates.
6 days.
I have my kids' birthdays tattooed on me because I can't remember any of them. I remember music and samples. I don't know what day it is. The other day I had to ask someone what year it was.
1992, Chris.
I know. I was like, 2021 or 2022? I don't know where I am. Who am I? Tell me, help.
So just before I let you go, I do want to talk about the Rave Commandments book. Like the first book you did, again, I'm just going to stress, if you do want to dig really deep into Chris Lunacy's life and the Kniteforce story, I do urge you to go and grab the How to Squander Your Potential. It's an amazing book. Get the remix copy because it is the latest version. The next book is the Rave Commandments. Chris, what's the Rave Commandments all about?
Basically, I never know whether I'm being arrogant or stupid. Like, I think there might be a very, very small line between those two. But I am a person that thinks about everything really. Sometimes I wish I could shut my brain up because it's annoying, So I tend to think about the scene, and I think about how my behavior in it. And I think about the things that I did that were good and bad and what went wrong. And hindsight is glorious because you get to look back and go, oh, I wish I hadn't have done that. Or what would happen if I did this? And I started coming up with, it actually started off as a kind of philosophy or maybe a self-help book. I just wanted to write stuff down that clarified my thoughts about what I should be doing. Because I know what I should be doing on an instinctive level, but sometimes it helps to actually write things down and go, maybe I shouldn't be doing that because the result isn't really what I thought it was going to be. So the Rave Commandments came about as me just trying to find a fun way to give myself some guidelines, because I find some people don't like it, but I like restrictions and guidelines when I make music and stuff. I often break them, but I like to have them in the first place because it gives me a path to walk without getting distracted by everything. I'm a person that never watches Netflix because there's too many choices. So I go on it and I look at a few things. I'm bored. I'll just go and read a book that I've read before. So with my life and with how I behave in the rave scene, I wanted to try and make some regulations and understand the process of things and why I do the things I do. So basically, it's a book about how to behave, which is, who am I to tell anyone how to behave? That's, I don't want it, but it's not really me saying you should do this. It's me saying I did this and it either worked or didn't. And when it didn't work, I paid the consequences, and these were the consequences, and that wasn't good. So maybe we should do it this way, and it's everything from one of the first things is we shouldn't steal music from our own people. Like the original rave music, when you sampled from outside the scene. And I use Liquid's Sweet Harmony as a good example. Like he sampled that piano from outside the scene. He made a rave tune and it was great. But if you remember the early years, 92, 93, 94, a lot of people sampled that same piano from Liquid and did their own versions. And while there's nothing inherently wrong with that, you're not achieving anything. You're like, I compared it to cannibalism. You're eating your own people. You're not bringing anything new. So in the pillar of like the music, you've taken a brick from the bottom and you put it on the top. And that just makes the whole thing unstable. And if one or two people do it, that's fine. If loads and loads of people do it, you end up just the whole thing collapses, which is kind of what happened in some ways. So it's just talking about stuff like that, where you can do something which you think isn't a big deal, and it isn't an isolated incident, but perhaps we shouldn't be doing that. Because not only does it harm the sales for Liquid, and then it harms like the theme because we're not bringing anything new, but it also harms the future, because when people 10 years look back for some inspiration, they go, oh, I've heard that. And they look back a bit further, oh, it's the same thing again. Oh, it's the same thing again. It achieves nothing. So we need to start just making sure we don't do that anymore. And I know that's kind of fallen out of vogue, sampling that piano anyway. It's just a good example of how it achieves nothing, except for a quick. Bootlegs are the same. There's nothing wrong with doing a bootleg, but if it's not pushing forward in any way, then you're just treading water. And if everyone just treads water, we don't go anywhere. And eventually we get tired and drown. So it's just a load of stuff like that. And I'm not saying I'm right. I often put forward an argument, then I undercut the whole thing I just said, because I want to find the truth of it, I want to find the truth of these things. So that's basically what it is. The Rave Commandments is various thoughts I've had on how we should behave, what we need to do, looking back on how the scene used to be and how we can make that the future, all that sort of thing. You will either find it very interesting or absolute drivel. I don't know, but most people read it like it. So, we'll see.
Nice, mate. Well, look, I think it's great the continued contribution you keep making into the scene, mate. You're a very well-balanced guy with a quirky look on how things should be done, and it's about having a bit of fun. And I think that's importantly what we all want to do, right? We all want to have a bit of fun with this. And I think, what we're doing, releasing the music and the books and, the event, I know is going to be, top of the pile of fun for sure. So, Chris, mate, I really appreciate you taking the time, mate. And cannot wait for the 17th. I need to grab myself a copy of the books. If you've only got 5 copies left, I shall go and grab one after this, because
I'll send you one.
Thanks, mate. You're too kind.
You've got to pay airplay one way or another for all this advertising.
You better bloody sign it then.
Oh, I have. I was asked to sign them anyway, so I signed them already. And I know Blame does that, but I can't help but feel getting a record with Blame's signature is worth having, and getting a book with my signature just still, I did it anyway. The most valuable is one that hasn't been signed. And then I realised that I didn't save one for me, so now I've signed my own copy.
That is brilliant.
I'm going to put Lunacy. You're great. Love Lunacy.
To me, love me. Nice one, Chris. Just hang on in there, mate. I'll end it and just have a quick catch up. But thank you, everyone, for listening. I really do appreciate it. I know it's getting a little bit late in the UK and Europe and various other places, so it's been great to have your ears. Just to recap that competition once again, to win 2 tickets to Knite Club at Scala, 17th of September. a TP, one of only 5 copies of the new Shades of Rhythm box set. Let me tell you, that is well worth it. And also a new copy of the Rave Commandments book as well. All you need to do is drop a comment in either Facebook or YouTube for this live stream with one of the DJs that's playing at Scala. You could put a few of them if you want to enter a few times. I don't care, go for it. There's plenty of DJs there to choose from. So Chris, again, thank you very much, mate. I really appreciate your time, mate. And here's the next 30 years of Kniteforce.
Yep, I can't wait to see you on the 17th. It's going to be so good. I've got you
Nice,
one,
mate.
so you'll be fine.
One drink ticket. That's more I've got on Saturday. Jesus.
No, I'm not doing that. That's another thing. I'm making sure all the DJs get nicely sorted out. Again, it's
Nice.
just want to have a good party. So, yeah,
mate, we shall have that indeed for sure. Nice one, mate. I will take care. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you next Tuesday for the Dreamscape 11 Tribute Show Part 2. And yes, there's going to be 3 parts altogether. Chris, I'll take it easy, mate. We'll catch you soon.
Thank you very much. See you later. Thank you.
Right.